The frozen world of Veth-4 was not kind to soft creatures. Kim Yuna learned this on her first day when she stepped outside the research facility and felt the cold bite through 3 layers of thermal clothing. The temperature was minus 60 degrees. Her breath turned to ice crystals before it left her lips. She was 28 years old, trained as a medic, and she had volunteered for this assignment because nobody else wanted it. The Korathi did not feel the cold the same way humans did. They were massive creatures, standing 8 feet tall with scales as black as the void between stars. Their eyes could see heat, and their bodies ran cold like the ancient reptiles of Earth. When Yuna first saw one up close, she understood why humans called them predators. Everything about them was designed to kill. Their claws could tear through metal. Their teeth were meant for crushing bone. They moved with a silence that made Yuna's heart beat faster every time one passed her in the corridor. Commander D was the worst of them. He led the elite guard, 200 Korathi warriors who protected the mining operation on Veth-4. He was taller than the others, with scars running across his scaled face and eyes that seemed to look through Yuna rather than at her. The first time they met, he had looked down at her and made a sound that might have been laughter. "The Galactic Union sends us a prey animal to heal our wounded," he had said to his guards. How generous of them. Yuna had said nothing. She had learned that silence was sometimes the best answer. She did her job, treated the injuries that came through her medical bay, and tried not to think about how the Korathi looked at her like she was food. 3 months passed this way. Yuna worked, slept, and tried to stay warm. She made no friends among the Korathi, and the other humans on the station kept to themselves. Loneliness became her constant companion. Then she found the cubs. It happened on a night when sleep would not come. Yuna walked through the lower levels of the facility, near the waste processing tunnels where nobody else went. She heard a sound, soft and strange, like nothing she had heard before. It was a clicking noise, mixed with something that sounded almost like crying. She followed the sound into a dark tunnel, using her flashlight to guide her way. The smell was terrible, a mixture of rotting food and something else she could not name. She almost turned back, but the crying sound came again, and something inside her would not let her leave. She found them huddled in a corner, 3 small shapes pressed together against the cold. Cubs, Korathi cubs. They were the size of large dogs, their scales still soft and gray instead of the hard black of adults. Their eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, and when her flashlight touched them, they made that clicking cry again. Yuna had read about Korathi young in her training materials. Cubs stayed with their mothers for the first 5 years of life. Without a mother, they could not survive. They did not know how to hunt. They did not know how to regulate their body temperature. They simply died. These 3 were dying. She could see it in the way they moved, slow and weak. She could see it in their eyes, which should have been bright but were growing dim. She should have reported them. That was the protocol. Orphaned cubs were handled by Korathi authorities, which usually meant they were killed. Cubs without mothers were considered defective. Cubs from low-caste mothers were considered worthless. It was brutal, but it was their way. Yuna looked at the 3 small creatures pressing against each other for warmth they could not produce. She thought about protocol. She thought about rules. Then she took off her thermal jacket and wrapped it around them. The cubs went still. For a moment, Yuna thought they might attack her. Even young, their claws were sharp. But instead, the largest one made a different sound, a soft clicking that seemed almost like a question. It pressed its snout against her hand. Her hand was warm. To a cold-blooded creature slowly freezing to death, her hand must have felt like a small sun. Yuna began to visit them every night. She brought food from the cafeteria, meat scraps that she hid in her pockets. She brought heating pads that she stole from the medical supplies. She sat with them in the dark tunnel and let them press against her body, sharing her warmth. She named them after 3 days. The largest one, a female, she called Rin. The middle one, a male with a crooked tail, she called Tao. The smallest one, who seemed to be always hungry, she called Bo. They learned their names quickly. They learned her scent even faster. By the second week, they would cry when she left. By the third week, they followed her to the tunnel entrance each night, watching her go with those glowing eyes. By the fourth week, she realized they had imprinted on her. The other Korathi began to notice that she smelled different. She carried the scent of cubs on her clothing, in her hair, on her skin. They looked at her strangely but said nothing. Perhaps they thought she had been near the breeding facilities. Perhaps they did not care enough to ask. Commander D cared. He found her on the fifth week, coming out of the waste tunnels at 3 in the morning. He was waiting in the corridor, his massive form blocking the only exit. His heat-sensing eyes looked at her, then past her, into the tunnel where 3 small shapes were watching. "What have you done, human?" His voice was cold, colder than the air outside. Yuna did not run. There was nowhere to run. She straightened her back and met his gaze, even though every instinct told her to look away. "They were dying," she said. "I fed them." Commander D moved past her into the tunnel. Yuna heard the cubs make their clicking cry, but this time it was different. It was a warning sound. They were warning him away from her. When he came back, his expression had changed. There was something in his eyes that Yuna could not read. "Do you know what you have done?" he asked. "You have fed them. In our law, that means you own their loyalty, a prey creature owning the loyalty of Korathi young." He made that sound again, the one that might have been laughter. "This is an abomination." "Then kill me," Yuna said. She did not know where the words came from. "Kill me and take them to be culled like you planned." The commander went very still. Behind her, the cubs were clicking louder now, their small claws scraping against the tunnel floor as they moved closer to her. "They have named you," Commander D said slowly. "I can hear it in their calls. Do you know what they call you, human?" Yuna shook her head. "Warm Mother." He spoke the words like they burned his tongue. "They call you Warm Mother." He turned and walked away. At the end of the corridor, he stopped. "Keep them alive, prey creature. The law protects you now, but laws can change. I will be watching." Then he was gone, and Yuna was alone with 3 cubs who pressed against her legs and clicked softly, calling her by the only name that mattered to them. She knelt down and wrapped her arms around them. They were cold. They were always cold. But when they pressed against her, when they felt her warmth, they made a sound she had never heard before. It was not clicking. It was not crying. It was purring. Yuna held them tighter and made a promise she knew she might not be able to keep. "I will keep you warm," she whispered, "whatever it takes." In the darkness of the waste tunnels, on a frozen world that did not want her, Kim Yuna became a mother to 3 predator cubs who saw her as the warmest thing in their universe. It was the beginning of something that would burn across. 3 months changed everything. The cubs no longer lived in the waste tunnels. Yuna had moved them to a storage room next to her quarters, a small space that she filled with heating pads and thermal blankets. She had reported them officially, claiming she found them and was raising them according to Korathi law. The administrators had looked at her like she was insane, but the law was clear. She had fed them first. They belonged to her. Rin, Tal, and Bo grew quickly. They were the size of large wolves now, their scales beginning to harden into the black armor of adult Korathi, but they still slept in a pile around the heating unit in their room. They still pressed against Yuna whenever she visited, seeking her warmth like flowers seeking the sun. They still called her Warm Mother in their clicking language. The other Korathi avoided her. She had become something strange to them, something that did not fit into their understanding of the universe. A prey creature raising predator young. It was wrong. It was unnatural, but it was legal, and so they could do nothing but watch and wait. Commander D watched more than anyone. Yuna would see him sometimes, standing at the end of corridors, his heat-sensing eyes tracking her movements. He never spoke to her. He never came close, but she could feel his gaze like a weight on her shoulders. She learned not to care. The cubs needed her, and that was enough. The morning the cold came started like any other. Yuna woke at 6, checked on the cubs, and went to the medical bay for her shift. The facility was quiet, the same as always. The mining teams were out in the ice fields. The researchers were in their labs. Everything was normal. Then the alarm started. The sound was deafening, a screaming wail that echoed through every corridor. Yuna ran to the nearest screen and saw the warning flashing in red letters. Geothermal failure. Critical. All sectors. Veth 4 was a frozen world, but the facility stayed warm because of the geothermal grid. Pipes ran deep into the planet, drawing heat from the core and spreading it through every building. Without that heat, the temperature inside would match the temperature outside within hours. -60 degrees, then -70, then -90. Death would come quickly. Yuna ran. She did not think about protocol. She did not think about the evacuation orders that were now blasting through the speakers. She thought only of 3 cubs who were waiting for her in a storage room, who could not survive the cold, who needed her. She reached her quarters in minutes. The storage room door was open. The heating pads were still working, running on backup power, but the room was empty. The cubs were gone. Yuna felt something cold spread through her chest, colder than the air that was already beginning to bite. She searched the room, the corridor, her own quarters. Nothing. No sign of them. Then she heard it, faint, distant, almost lost in the noise of the alarms. A clicking cry coming from the east. The eastern tunnels. The old mining passages that had been sealed years ago because they were unstable. The cubs must have smelled something, prey perhaps, and gone to hunt. They did not understand danger the way adults did. They were still children, following their instincts. Yuna ran toward the sound. The eastern tunnel entrance was blocked by a security gate. She overrode it with her medical codes, not caring that she was breaking a dozen regulations. The gate opened, and cold poured out like water. The geothermal grid did not reach these tunnels. They were already frozen. She went in anyway. The flashlight on her wrist was her only guide. The walls were covered in ice, blue and beautiful and deadly. Her breath came in clouds that froze instantly. She could feel her fingers going numb even inside her gloves. The clicking cry came again, closer now. And then another sound, a hissing, sliding sound that made Yuna stop in her tracks. Ice serpents. She had read about them in the briefing materials. Native predators of Veth 4, drawn to heat signatures. They were 12 feet long, with bodies that could crush metal and mouths full of needle teeth. The miners called them White Death. Yuna moved faster. She found the cubs in a dead-end passage, their backs against the ice wall. 3 ice serpents surrounded them, their white bodies coiling and uncoiling as they moved closer. The cubs were clicking frantically, their warning calls echoing off the frozen walls. But they were young, untrained. They did not know how to fight. Yuna did not think. She grabbed a broken pipe from the ground and threw herself between the serpents and the cubs. The serpents stopped. Their heat-sensing pits focused on her, this new source of warmth that had suddenly appeared. She was smaller than the cubs, weaker, easier prey. "Run," she said to the cubs, her voice steady even though her hands were shaking. "Go back to the entrance, now." The cubs did not move. They pressed closer to her, their clicks changing to something different, something desperate. "Warm Mother," they called. "Warm Mother, no." The first serpent struck. Yuna swung the pipe with all her strength and felt it connect with something solid. The serpent recoiled, hissing. But the second one was already moving, its body whipping toward her with terrible speed. She dodged, but not fast enough. Pain exploded across her side as teeth tore through her thermal suit and into flesh. She screamed but did not fall. She could not fall. If she fell, the cubs would die. She swung the pipe again. Again. Blood was running down her side now, steaming in the frozen air. The cold was eating at her, slowing her movements, turning her muscles to ice. but she did not stop. One serpent fell, its skull crushed. The other two circled, their movements becoming cautious. This small, warm creature was not easy prey. It kept fighting. It kept bleeding. It kept standing. Finally, they retreated. Serpents were predators, but they were also survivors. They knew when prey was not worth the cost. Yuna fell to her knees. The pipe dropped from her numb fingers. She looked down and saw the blood spreading across the ice, bright red against white. She saw her leg bent at an angle that legs should not bend. She had not even felt it break. Warm Mother. Rin was beside her, pressing against her with a body that was barely warmer than the ice. Warm Mother hurt. Yuna tried to speak, but her teeth were chattering too hard. The cold was inside her now, in her blood, in her bones. She was dying. She knew this with a certainty that left no room for hope. But the cubs were alive. That was enough. "We go," Tal said, his crooked tail wrapping around her arm. "We carry." They were too small to carry her far, but they tried. They gripped her suit in their teeth and pulled her across the ice, deeper into the tunnels, away from the serpents, away from the entrance, toward a faint warmth that their heat-sensing eyes could see. An old geothermal pocket, a place where the planet's heat still leaked through the rock. It was weak, barely warmer than freezing, but it was something. They dragged her into a small cave and pressed around her on all sides. Three cold-blooded creatures trying to keep a warm-blooded one alive. It was impossible. It should not have worked. But they tried. Yuna felt her body temperature dropping. 28 degrees, 26, 24. The cold was winning. It was always going to win. She wrapped her arms around Bo, the smallest, who was shaking against her chest. She pulled Rin and Tal closer, covering as much of them as she could with her failing body. "Stay warm," she whispered, her voice barely a sound. "Stay warm for me." The cubs cried out then, a sound that was not clicking or purring or any noise she had heard before. It was a scream, high and terrible, that echoed through the tunnels and up through the rock and out into the frozen sky above. It was the cry that meant Mother is dying. And far away, in the facility that was rapidly losing heat, Commander D heard it. He stopped in the middle of the evacuation corridor. Around him, Korathi warriors were moving toward the transport ships, following protocol, saving themselves. But he stood frozen, listening to a sound he had not heard since his own mother died 100 years ago. The cubs were calling, not for their birth mother who was long dead. They were calling for the human. They were calling for their warm mother. Commander D turned away from the evacuation ships. He walked toward the armory where the elite guard kept their weapons. His steps were slow at first, then faster. By the time he reached the armory, he was running. He had a city to burn. The cold was a living thing. Yuna could feel it crawling through her body, shutting down parts of her one by one. First her feet went numb, then her hands. Then the numbness spread up her arms and legs like water filling a glass. Her heart was still beating, but each beat was slower than the last. The cubs had not left her side. They pressed against her from all directions, their bodies a wall around her that did almost nothing against the cold. Korathi were cold-blooded. They had no heat to give, but they tried anyway, pushing closer, clicking softly as if their voices could somehow make her warm. "Warm Mother," Bo whispered against her chest. "Warm Mother, wake up." Yuna was not sleeping. She was somewhere between sleep and death, a gray place where the pain had stopped and everything felt far away. She could hear the cubs, but their voices sounded like they were coming from the end of a long tunnel. She wanted to answer them. She wanted to tell them she was still here, but her lips would not move. Her body temperature was at 24 degrees now. Normal for humans was 37. She was 13 degrees below what she needed to survive. The medical part of her brain, the part that had studied and trained and worked, told her she had maybe 30 minutes left, maybe less. The geothermal pocket they had found was barely warmer than the rest of the tunnels. It leaked heat from deep in the planet, but not enough. Never enough. Yuna could see her breath forming crystals in the air. She could see ice forming on her eyelashes every time she blinked. She thought about her life. It seemed like a strange thing to do, but dying people always thought about their lives. She thought about Earth, which she had left 10 years ago and never returned to. She thought about her mother who had cried when she left. She thought about all the places she had worked, all the patients she had saved, all the lonely nights in space stations and colony ships. She had never expected to die like this, freezing in a tunnel on a frozen world, surrounded by alien cubs who called her mother. But if she had to die, she was glad it was for them. "I am sorry," she managed to say, the words coming out broken and weak. "I am sorry I could not keep you warm." Rin pressed closer, her snout touching Yuna's cheek. The contact felt distant, like it was happening to someone else. "No," Rin clicked. "You warm, always warm, best warm." Yuna tried to smile. She did not know if she succeeded. The wound in her side had stopped bleeding. That was bad. That meant her blood was too cold to flow properly. Her broken leg was completely numb, which was good because it meant she could not feel the pain. Small blessings in a dying moment. She pulled the cubs closer with arms that barely worked. She could feel them shivering, their young bodies struggling to regulate their temperature in the cold. If she died, they would die too. They were too young to survive alone. They would curl up around her body and wait for warmth that would never come. The thought was unbearable. "Go," she said. "Go back, find help." The cubs did not move. "We stay," Tal said, his crooked tail wrapping tighter around her arm. "We stay with warm mother, always." "You will die." "Then we die warm." Yuna felt tears on her cheeks. They froze almost instantly, tiny crystals of salt and water. She had not cried in years. She had trained herself not to cry, but here at the end the tears came anyway. She was going to die, and she was going to take these 3 children with her. All because she had wanted to save them. All because she had thought her warmth was enough. It was not enough. It was never going to be enough. The gray place was getting darker now. She could feel herself slipping away, her consciousness fading like a candle in the wind. The cubs were crying again, that terrible sound that meant mother is dying. It echoed off the ice walls and filled the cave with their grief. Yuna closed her eyes. She thought she heard something, a distant sound different from the cubs crying, a rumbling, deep and low that seemed to come from everywhere at once, but she was too far gone to understand what it meant. She was falling now, falling into a darkness that had no bottom. The last thing she felt was warmth. Not much, just a faint touch against her face, like a hand made of fire. She thought she was imagining it. She thought it was her brain shutting down, creating fantasies to comfort her in the end. But the warmth grew stronger. And then there was light. It came from above, orange and blinding, tearing through the darkness like a knife. Heat followed it, rolling down in waves that made the ice walls hiss and crack. The cubs screamed, not in fear but in shock, as the temperature around them jumped 10 degrees in seconds. Yuna could not see what was happening. Her eyes would not open, but she could feel it. The cold was retreating, pushed back by something hot and fierce and impossible. The gray place was getting brighter. The darkness was pulling away. She heard voices, deep voices, clicking and rumbling in a language she had learned to understand. Korathi voices. "Here she is here. Move the rocks quickly. Her temperature is too low. We need heat, more heat." And then a voice she recognized. Commander D, his words cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Burn it all. I do not care what it costs. Burn it all until she is warm." Something wrapped around her. A cloak, heavy and thick, that radiated heat like it contained a small sun. Korathi thermal cloaks designed to keep cold-blooded warriors warm in the deepest cold, worth more than a year of her salary, and someone was wrapping one around her like it was nothing. She was lifted then, carried by hands that were massive and scaled and surprisingly gentle. The cubs were beside her. She could hear them clicking, calling out that she was alive, that Warm Mother was alive. Someone was carrying them too. The heat kept coming. Yuna did not understand where it was coming from. It felt like the entire world was on fire, like she was being carried through the heart of a star. But the fire did not burn her. It saved her. She opened her eyes just for a moment. She saw Commander D looking down at her. His face was strange, twisted into an expression she could not read. Behind him, the sky was orange. Flames were everywhere, roaring towers of fire that reached up into the frozen darkness. Something was burning, something huge. What, she tried to say, what is happening? Commander D's voice was quiet, almost soft. We are keeping you warm, Warm Mother, whatever it takes. Then the darkness came back, but it was a different darkness. Not the cold gray of death, but the warm black of sleep. Her body was fighting now, climbing back toward life 1 degree at a time. 25 degrees, 26, 27. The last thing she heard before she fell asleep was the cubs, pressed against her sides, purring with a sound she had never heard them make before. It was the sound of relief, the sound of joy, the sound of children whose mother had come back from the dead. Above them, a city burned. Commander D had given the order. The abandoned city of Kethvorin, built above the geothermal pocket, filled with unstable fuel reserves that the mining company had never bothered to remove. He had sent the elite guard to plant charges in every building. He had watched as they ignited the fuel, creating a firestorm that melted through ice and rock and darkness. 200 Korathi warriors had carried their wounded through flame and chaos. They had walked through fire to reach a single human who was not supposed to matter. But she mattered to 3 cubs who called her mother. And in the end, that was enough. The elite guard carried Yuna out of the tunnels and into the cold night air. Behind them, the city was still burning, lighting up the frozen sky like a second sun. The heat reached out across the ice fields, warming everything it touched. Commander D stood at the edge of the flames and watched his people carry the human away. The cubs were wrapped around her, refusing to let go even for a moment. They were clicking softly, a sound he remembered from his own childhood. The sound of cubs singing to their mother. He had burned a city for a prey creature. His superiors would be furious. The Galactic Union would demand answers. There would be tribunals and investigations and consequences. He did not care. She had stood between death and their young. She had bled for them. She had been willing to freeze for them. His people had burned worlds for less. A city was a small price. The stars, the medical bay on the evacuation ship was small and crowded. Yuna lay on a bed that was not designed for humans, wrapped in thermal blankets that hummed with constant heat. Machines beeped around her, tracking her temperature, her heart rate, her blood oxygen levels. She had been unconscious for 2 days. The cubs had not left her side. They slept on the floor next to her bed, curled together in a pile of black scales and soft purring. The medical staff had tried to remove them twice. Both times, the cubs had bared their teeth and made sounds that promised violence. After the second attempt, Commander D had stationed 2 guards at the door with orders to let no one touch the cubs. Yuna woke on the 3rd day. The first thing she saw was white. White ceiling, white walls, white light that hurt her eyes. She blinked, trying to understand where she was, trying to remember what had happened. Then the memories came flooding back. The cold, the serpents, the blood on the ice. The cubs. She sat up too fast and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through her side, a sharp reminder of the wound that had nearly killed her. Her leg was in a cast, heavy and awkward, but she did not care about any of that. She looked around frantically, searching for 3 small shapes that meant everything to her. Warm Mother. They were on her before she could react. Rin reached her first, jumping onto the bed and pressing against her chest. Tal was second, his crooked tail whipping back and forth with excitement. Bo climbed up last, too small to jump, and burrowed under her arm with a cry of pure joy. Yuna held them. She held them so tight that her wounded side screamed in protest, but she did not care. They were alive. They were warm. They were here. "I thought I lost you," she whispered into Rin's scales. "I thought you would die because of me." "No die," Rin said firmly. "Warm Mother save us. Warm Mother always save us." "I did not save you. I almost got you killed. You stand between us and white death." Tal's voice was serious, adult almost. "You fight when you cannot fight. You bleed for us. That is what mothers do." Yuna felt the tears coming again. She had cried more in the past 3 days than in the past 10 years. A sound at the door made her look up. Commander D stood in the entrance, his massive form blocking the light. He looked different somehow. The contempt that had always been in his eyes was gone, replaced by something she could not name. "You are awake," he said. "Good. The doctors were not sure you would survive." "How long was I out?" 3 days. We are on a transport ship heading to the nearest station. The medical facilities there are better." He paused, his eyes moving to the cubs pressed against her. "They have not eaten since we found you. They refuse to leave your side." Yuna looked down at the 3 small bodies surrounding her. 3 days without food. For young cubs, that was dangerous. "Eat," she said firmly. "Now that is an order." The cubs looked at each other, then at her. "You come too," Bo said. "I cannot walk. My leg is broken." "Then we wait." Commander D made a sound that might have been laughter. "They are stubborn, like their mother." He moved into the room and Yuna tensed, but he did not approach her. Instead, he walked to a small table and picked up a datapad. "I should tell you what happened," he said. "After you went into the tunnels, after the cubs called for you." "I remember fire," Yuna said slowly. "I remember heat. I thought I was imagining it." "You were not." Dee turned the datapad toward her. On the screen was an image of a city in flames, towers of fire reaching into the sky, buildings collapsing into rivers of molten metal. The scale of the destruction was almost impossible to understand. "This is Keth Vorin," Dee said, "or what is left of it. An abandoned mining city built directly above the geothermal pocket where you and the cubs were trapped. The tunnels were collapsed. We could not reach you by normal means." Yuna stared at the image. "You burned it. You burned an entire city." "The fuel reserves ignited easily. The heat melted through the rock and ice, creating a path down to you. It was the only way." "An entire city." Yuna's voice was hollow. "You destroyed an entire city for me." Commander D set down the datapad. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he walked closer, stopping just out of reach of the cubs who were watching him with wary eyes. "When I was young," he said, "my mother fought a pack of rock hunters to save my siblings. She killed 3 of them before they brought her down. She died with her claws in the throat of the 4th. His voice was flat, controlled. "We honor her still. Every year my family speaks her name and remembers what she did." "I am sorry." "Do not be sorry. She did what mothers do. She stood between death and her young. She bled for us. She died for us." He looked at Yuna with those heat-sensing eyes that saw everything. "You did the same. You are small and soft and weak by every measure my people understand. But you stood between ice serpents and 3 cubs who were not even your species. You fought with a broken leg and an open wound. You were willing to freeze to death keeping them warm." Yuna did not know what to say. "My people have burned worlds for less," Dee continued. "We have destroyed cities for insults to our honor. We have waged wars for resources and pride and revenge. But this city, Keth Vorin, was the first we have ever burned for love." The word hung in the air between them. Love. A word that Yuna had not expected to hear from this warrior who had called her a prey animal. "The Galactic Union is not happy," Dee said. "The fuel reserves were technically their property. There will be a tribunal. I will be asked to explain why I destroyed Union assets for a single human medic. What will you tell them? Commander D smiled. It was the first time Yuna had ever seen him smile, and it transformed his face into something almost gentle. I will tell them the truth, that a human did something no Korathi would have dared to do, that she loved our young enough to die for them, that she earned a debt that my entire species could not repay. He paused, and that a city was a small price for a mother's life. The cubs were watching this exchange with wide eyes. They did not understand all the words, but they understood enough. When Dee finished speaking, Rin stood up on the bed and faced him directly. You save Warm Mother, she said in her clicking voice. You burned for her. Yes. Then you are Pack. Rin's words were firm, final. You are family. Warm Mother's family is our family. Commander D looked at the small cub who was declaring him family. For a moment, his expression was unreadable. Then he lowered his head in a gesture that Yuna recognized. It was the bow that Korathi gave to their elders, to those they respected. I would be honored to be Pack, he said. Bo jumped off the bed and walked over to D. The small cub looked up at the massive warrior, then pressed his head against Dee's leg in the Korathi gesture of acceptance. You warm too, Bo said. Different warm, fire warm. Something changed in the room then. Yuna felt it, a shift in the air like the moment before a storm. She looked at Commander D, at the cubs who were now circling him and clicking with welcome, and she understood that something new had been born in the flames of Keth Vorin. Not just a debt, not just respect. A family. She lay back on the bed, her wounded body aching, her heart full of something she could not name. Outside the window, the stars were passing by, cold and distant. But inside this small room, surrounded by 3 cubs and a warrior who had burned a city for her, she felt warmer than she had ever felt in her life. Thank you, she said to Dee, for everything. He looked at her with those ancient eyes. Do not thank me, Warm Mother. Thank yourself. You are the one who taught us what prey creatures can become. He turned and walked to the door. At the threshold, he stopped. Rest now. The tribunal will be soon. I will need you there to stand beside me when I explain what we did. His voice softened. The galaxy should see the mother who was worth a city. Then he was gone, and Yuna was alone with her cubs. They climbed back onto the bed, surrounding her with their bodies, pressing close even though she was already warm. They purred against her, that sound of comfort and safety and home. We stay, Tal said. We stay with Warm Mother forever. Forever is a long time. Not long enough. Yuna smiled and closed her eyes. The pain was fading now, replaced by exhaustion and something else, something that felt like peace. Behind her closed eyes, she could still see the city burning, towers of flame reaching toward the stars, the heat that had saved her life. She wondered what the tribunal would say. She wondered what the galaxy would think of a species that burned cities for love. But mostly, she wondered how she had gotten so lucky, to be found by 3 small creatures who needed her, to be saved by a warrior who had learned to see her as more than prey. She fell asleep with the cubs wrapped around her, their purring a lullaby that followed her into dreams. In her dreams, she was warm. She was always warm. The tribunal chamber was massive. It was built for giants, with ceilings that stretched up into darkness and seats that could hold the largest species in the Galactic Union. Representatives from 50 worlds sat in rows of stone, their eyes fixed on the center of the room where Commander D stood alone. Yuna watched from a balcony above, her hands gripping the rail. She still walked with a limp, and 2 of her fingers had been lost to frostbite. But she was alive. She was warm, and she was not going to let Dee face this alone. The cubs sat beside her. They were bigger now, 6 weeks of growth making them almost wolf-sized. Their scales had darkened to true black, hard as armor. But when they looked at her, their eyes were still the same. Soft, trusting, full of love. The head judge, A massive creature from a water world spoke in a voice that echoed off the stone walls. Commander D of the Korathi Elite Guard, you stand accused of the destruction of Galactic Union property, the city of Kethvorin, its fuel reserves, and the surrounding infrastructure. The estimated cost is 400 million credits. The judge paused. How do you plead? Guilty, D said. His voice was calm without fear. A murmur ran through the chamber. The representatives leaned forward, curious. They had expected excuses, justifications, not a simple admission. You do not deny it, the judge asked. I cannot deny what I am proud of. Another murmur, louder this time. The judge raised one massive hand for silence. Explain yourself, Commander. Why did you destroy property worth 400 million credits? D stood taller. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from worlds he had never visited, species he had never spoken to. Then he spoke. I destroyed that city to save a single human, a medic named Kim Yuna who was trapped in the tunnels beneath Kethvorin. She was dying from cold and from wounds she received fighting ice serpents. The only way to reach her in time was to burn through the rock and ice above her, so I gave the order, and I would give it again. A single human, the judge repeated slowly. You destroyed 400 million credits of property for a single human life. Yes. Why, what is this human to you? Commander D was silent for a moment. Then he looked up, toward the balcony where Yuna sat with the cubs beside her. May I call a witness? The judge hesitated, then nodded. D spoke directly to Yuna. Warm mother, will you come down? Yuna felt every eye in the chamber turn toward her. Her heart was pounding, but she did not let it show. She stood, steadied herself on her injured leg, and made her way down to the chamber floor. The cubs followed, staying close to her sides. When she reached D, she stood beside him, small and fragile compared to his massive form. The representatives whispered to each other, clearly confused. This is the human you destroyed a city for? The judge asked. Yes. She does not look like much. Yuna said nothing. She had learned that silence was sometimes the best answer. The judge turned to her. Human, tell us what happened. Why was a Korathi commander willing to burn a city for you? Yuna took a breath, then she told them. She told them about finding the cubs in the waste tunnels, starving and alone. She told them about feeding them, keeping them warm, watching them grow. She told them about the night the cold came, when she went into the frozen tunnels to find them. She told them about the ice serpents, the fight, the blood on the ice. She told them about wrapping herself around 3 small cubs, trying to keep them warm with a body that was slowly freezing to death. When she finished, the chamber was silent. The judge spoke slowly. You are saying that you, a human, fought predators and nearly died to protect Korathi young. Yes. Why? Yuna looked at the cubs beside her. Rin, Tal, and Bo, who had refused to leave her side through all of this, who had called her mother when their real mother was dead, who had been willing to die with her in the cold rather than leave her alone. Because they needed me, she said simply. Because no one else would help them. Because I could not let them die alone in the dark. The judge was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned back to D. Commander, you have heard her story. Now tell us yours. Why did you burn a city for a human who protected Korathi cubs? D stepped forward. When he spoke, his voice filled the chamber. The human had no claws, no scales, no venom. She was prey by every measure my people understand. She should have run. She should have saved herself. Instead, she stood between death and our young. She bled for them. She was willing to freeze for them. He paused, his eyes sweeping across the chamber. My people have burned worlds for less than what she gave. We have destroyed cities for insults to our honor. We have killed millions for pride and revenge. But this human, this small, soft creature that my people called prey, she did something that would have been heroic even for a Korathi warrior. She protected children who were not hers. She fought when she could not fight. She kept them warm when her own warmth was failing. He looked at the judge directly. You ask why I burned a city for her. I burned a city because she earned it, because she showed my people what courage truly looks like, because she was worth more than any fuel reserve or building or piece of property. His voice dropped lower. A city was a small price. The chamber erupted. Representatives were shouting, arguing, some in support and some in outrage. The judge called for order again and again, but the noise continued. Finally, a new voice cut through the chaos. It was an old Korathi, a female with scales that had faded to gray. She stood slowly, and the chamber fell silent. I am Elder Hana of the Korathi Council, she said. I have heard enough. This tribunal will render no punishment. The judge sputtered, Elder, the cost will be paid by the Korathi people, Hana said firmly. Every credit and more besides. She turned to look at Yuna, her ancient eyes filled with something that might have been wonder. Commander D acted according to our oldest law. A mother's life is sacred. One who stands between death and our young has earned all that we can give. This human, this Kim Yuna, did what few of our own warriors would dare. She walked down from her seat, her old body moving slowly but with purpose. When she reached Yuna, she stopped and looked at her for a long moment. We do not have a word for what you are, Hana said. You are not Korathi, but you are mother to Korathi young. You have bled for them, you have nearly died for them. She paused. So we will give you a new word, a new name. She reached out and touched Yuna's forehead, a gesture that made the cubs hiss softly before they calmed. From this day you are Kethvorin, she who is worth a city. This is your name among our people now and forever. Wherever you go, Korathi will know you. Wherever you need us, we will come. Yuna felt the weight of that name settle over her like a cloak. She did not know what to say. She had never wanted honors or titles. She had just wanted to keep 3 small cubs alive. But she bowed her head and accepted it. Thank you, Elder. Hana smiled, an expression that transformed her ancient face. No, Kethvorin, thank you. The tribunal ended without punishment. The Korathi paid the cost of the destroyed city and more, donations flowing from their homeworld to cover every credit. News of what had happened spread across the galaxy. The story of the human medic who had protected predator cubs. The story of the elite guard who had burned a city to save her. Years passed. Yuna became an ambassador, traveling between worlds as a symbol of what different species could become to each other. Wherever she went, 3 massive Korathi warriors went with her. Rin, Tal, and Bo had grown into adults now, 8 feet of black scales and deadly claws. They refused any assignment that would take them from her side. Other species feared them. The Korathi were known as predators, as warriors, as destroyers. When they walked into a room, everyone noticed. But the Korathi delegations always bowed to Yuna first. Because they knew her name. They knew her story. They knew that this small human, this soft creature who walked with a limp and was missing 2 fingers, was worth more to their people than any city. One day, a young diplomat from a distant world approached Yuna at a galactic summit. He looked nervous, his eyes darting between her and the 3 warriors who flanked her. Excuse me, Ambassador, he said. I have heard the stories, but I do not understand. Why do the Korathi honor you so much? You are just a human. Yuna smiled. It was a question she had been asked many times. I kept them warm, she said simply. They kept me warmer. The diplomat looked confused, but Rin spoke before he could ask another question. Her voice was deep now, the voice of an adult warrior. She is our mother, Rin said. She bled for us, she would have died for us, and we will protect her until the last star goes dark. The diplomat backed away, his eyes wide. Yuna reached up and touched Rin's arm, a gesture of comfort that the massive warrior leaned into like a child. Easy, she murmured. He did not mean any harm. No one harms warm mother, Rin said firmly. No one. Yuna laughed softly. Some things never changed. She looked out at the summit, at the hundreds of species gathered from across the galaxy, so different from each other, so often at war, but here at least they were trying to find peace. She thought about the frozen tunnels of Veth 4, about 3 starving cubs and a broken pipe and a city that burned like a sun, about a warrior who had called her prey and then burned the sky to keep her warm. The galaxy was cold, space was cold, life was often cold. But warmth could be found in the strangest places, in the bond between a human and 3 predator cubs, in the fire that a warrior built to save a single life, in the simple act of caring for someone who needed you. The cubs pressed closer to her, their massive bodies a wall of warmth around her. "Ready to go home?" Tal asked, his crooked tail swaying gently. Yuna nodded. She was tired. Summits always tired her. "Yes, let us go home." They walked out of the chamber together. A small human woman with a limp and 3 massive predator warriors who would destroy anyone who threatened her. Behind them, the galaxy watched. And the galaxy learned. Humans were not prey, they were not weak, they were not soft. They were protectors, they were mothers, they were worth burning cities for. And the Korathi would never let anyone forget it.